Imagine spending your entire life feeling like the unwanted child in your own family. Your sister is treated like a princess. Your parents bend over backwards for her. And when your wedding day finally comes, they try to let her walk down the aisle first. In a wedding dress. At your wedding. Yeah. But what they didn't realize was that my husband and I had a plan. And by the time the wedding was over, my parents had paid for the most expensive wedding of their lives. My sister was locked outside the venue, and the entire family turned against them. Intro call to action. Before we jump into this story, if you've ever had someone try to sabotage something important in your life, go ahead and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and stick around. Because today's story is one of the most satisfying family revenge stories you'll ever hear. Full story. Growing up, I always had this strange feeling that something about my family dynamic wasn't normal. You know how most parents try to treat their kids equally? Mine didn't. Not even close. My sister was the golden child, the miracle, the center of the universe. Everything revolved around her. Her birthdays were huge celebrations. Her achievements were praised endlessly. Her mistakes were brushed off like they never happened. Meanwhile, I was just kind of there. Not hated exactly, but definitely not wanted. I remember being a kid and asking my parents once if they loved my sister more than me. They immediately denied it. Then they scolded me for being spoiled and dramatic. After that, I stopped asking questions, but the feeling never went away. Over the years, I started forming my own theory. My sister had taken my parents years to conceive. She was their miracle baby. But then, barely any time later, surprise, they had me. Unplanned, unexpected, and maybe inconvenient. Money was tight back then. Raising two kids close together probably wasn't easy. So maybe, just maybe, they resented me for existing. I'll never know for sure. But what I do know is that the way they treated me growing up was very different from how they treated her. Still, I tried not to let it define my life. I focused on building my own future. And eventually, I met the man who would become my husband. He was kind, supportive, and most importantly, he saw exactly how my family treated me, and he hated it. When we got engaged, I was excited, but also nervous, because if there's one thing my family had always managed to do, it was ruin important moments in my life. And unfortunately, this time was no different. A few months before the wedding, my parents approached my fiancé with an offer. They told him they'd be willing to help pay for the wedding, but only if we agreed to something completely insane. They wanted my sister to walk down the aisle first in a full wedding dress at my wedding. Yes, you heard that right. Their reasoning. Apparently my sister was upset that I was getting married before she was, because she struggled with dating. So their solution was to let her basically pretend it was her wedding too. I remember sitting there in complete disbelief when my fiancé told me what they had asked. It felt like the ultimate confirmation of everything I'd suspected growing up. Even on the most important day of my life, they still wanted my sister to be the star. But then something unexpected happened. My fiancé smiled and said, "Let's let them think they're getting their way." At first, I didn't understand what he meant. But then he explained the plan. He would pretend to agree, act like he was totally on board with the idea. And since my parents believed the wedding was partly for my sister's benefit, they would be willing to spend a lot more money. And that's exactly what happened. Suddenly, my parents were offering to pay for things they'd never normally pay for. The expensive venue, the luxury catering, the high-end decorations, the premium photography package. Every time my fiancé suggested something extravagant, my parents reluctantly agreed, because in their minds, it was partly for their favorite daughter. Months went by, and slowly, piece by piece, they ended up funding one of the nicest weddings we could have imagined. But there was one detail they didn't know. We had hired security. Very strict security. On the day of the wedding, everything was perfect. The venue looked incredible. Guests were arriving. The atmosphere was full of excitement. But somewhere across town, my sister was getting ready in a wedding dress, completely convinced she was about to walk down the aisle. Except,